Welcome back to another episode of Telltale Books videos. I'm Greg, and I'm going to discuss the next in my Hal Clement series. This is his ninth published work, and it's called Assumption Unjustified. Assumption Unjustified was published in October of 1946. It is a novella. It was, of course, published in Astounding Science Fiction. I think everything that Clement has published so far was published in Astounding, if I'm not mistaken. And it was published in an issue which had a cover story by the cover illustration was by William Timmons, and my research says it doesn't really illustrate any of the stories. It's a beautiful cover illustration, though. I mostly don't care for Timmons' work on Astounding. I like Hubert Rogers a whole lot better, but this is a really, really nice illustration. But that is the actual issue of Astounding Science Fiction for October 1946, and it contains Assumption Unjustified by Hal Clement. I read the story, not wanting to put any usage on my beautiful copy of the October 46 Astounding, because I found one that is in just in amazing condition for that old of a magazine. Instead, I read it in the best of Hal Clement, what part of the Del Rey Ballantyne classic science fiction series that was published in the late 1970s, early 1980s. This is one of the first of them that I found when I started reading science fiction. I had read a story by Hal Clement in Where Do We Go From Here? And so when this best of collection came out, I had to get it. Besides, just look at that cover by Henry Van Dongen. Amazing, man. This is the kind of illustrations that made me want to be an artist. Seriously. I love this illustration. And this illustration does happen to be for Assumption Unjustified. And that's the kind of illustration that you look at it and it makes you want to open the book and start reading, because it is just so compelling, so interesting, so wild. I love it. I love illustration like that. I wish they'd bring that back. That's something that's missing from books today. But that's where I read Assumption Unjustified. Not just saying I read it just for this video in that book. I read it way back in 1979 when this book came out. In this book. Okay, so I've read this story a couple of times now. In the story, you have two aliens. They're husband and wife. And I'm going to stop right there and say that's a weakness of this story, that the aliens are too human. They get married, they go on honeymoons, too Earth-like. They're not alien enough. They should have their own cultural things. Maybe there's three of them in early, 1946 Astounding probably wouldn't have published a story with a three-way relationship, but um, do something to give them unique culture at least, especially since Clement goes. I mean, look at the alien on this cover. Very, very unhuman. Why would it have human cultural traits? Weakness of the story, but it really doesn't hurt the story too much. So the two aliens are going on their husband and wife, and they are going on their honeymoon, but one of them is old enough at a certain point in the life of these aliens, when they reach a certain age, there's something that they have to do biologically. They have to refresh themselves. And for the purposes of traveling, these aliens have identified certain planets that are safe refresher stations, and Earth is one of them. So they consider it safe so long as the people that stop on at Earth are very careful not to reveal themselves, not to harm anybody, just get what they need and leave. They can use it as their refresher station. So that's why these two are stopping on Earth, is to refresh. The story is mainly told from the point of view of the aliens, who are partly amphibious, as you can probably tell looking at the alien in the Van Dongen illustration. Um, they stop and they hide their spaceship, and they are very careful, hiding in the bushes, checking things out, watching patterns of when people are coming and going so that they can go about their business without being discovered. I don't know if I should spoil this or not, because it's really hard to talk much further without spoiling it. But I'm not going to. I'm going to hold back from that. I'm going to say, if you haven't read Assumption Unjustified, you need to go out and read it. It's an excellent story. It's one of the best by Clement. It's one of the best of the 1940s astounding. It is really good, despite the weakness that I outlined before. It's a really excellent investigation of the situation between superstition and rational thinking in a society, and how societies grow and mature. And so the story is definitely recommended. This is a top tale. Now, spoiler alert, I'm going to go forward from here. If you haven't read it, you want to just stop this video, go read it. If you have read it, you want to continue from here, because I'm going to mention the crux of the story, and that I want to do this because this is important to getting to the point of the story, that whole point between superstition and science. And that's the fact that these aliens are, what they're refreshing themselves with is blood drawn from human beings. And when viewed in a certain way, and especially with how they draw blood by drawing out of the neck, um, earlier human beings did see some of them and built their experience into the myth of vampirism. Now, the two aliens that are coming to Earth in the 1950s to do a refresher stop, they're very concerned about the superstitions, because the last time anybody visited Earth um, was like 70 years earlier, 1880s, and they didn't have cars, they didn't have internal combustion engines, they had steam power, but they were still very, human beings were still very superstitious. So he thought that's what he was going to be coming into, and he gets to 1950s Earth, and there's automobiles and airplanes, definitely in, internal combustion, and he's very concerned about why it's so different. But it also encourages him that maybe these people have gone past their superstitions, which of course we haven't. We are very superstitious today. And that's where the story really becomes interesting. Even though it doesn't specifically get into a dialogue about this, it does bring it up in a way that makes you start thinking about the situation with rational thinking and superstition, and how there's this kind of battle in our society between the two. And that makes this story really, really good. Aside from being just an enjoyable story with certain amount of humor, and I love the way he takes. I mean, In 1942, Van Vogt made a science fiction story out of vampires by making them aliens who are out to, who are evil and out to destroy. In 1946, Clement decided to revisit this issue but make these aliens not horrible, but just make them like normal people, which is probably why he decided to humanize these aliens to the degree he did, because it makes them seem like just everyday people going about their lives, just trying to get by, not wanting to hurt anybody, but needing to get this refreshment in order for them to make it to the destination where they're going to have their honeymoon. And the story is told from their point of view in a very empathetic manner, so that they are not seen as monsters. They are seen as nice. They are seen as decent. They have humor. They crack jokes. There are funny things that have it. It's a very enjoyable story. It all the way around. Good characterization of these aliens, I'd say, despite the fact that they're not all that alien. There's a purpose for them not being all that alien. Really imaginative biology going on here. So, as usual, Hal Clement doing his usual hard science thing and really thinking through, but about biology this time, not physics. So, Assumption Unjustified is definitely a top tale. I loved it. What did you think? Have you read Assumption Unjustified? If so, leave your comments about Assumption Unjustified, about Al Clement, about hard science fiction, about astounding science fiction at that time, about vampirism and the idea of finding science fictional explanations for horror stories, and about the battle between rationality and superstition. Leave all those kinds of comments in the comment section of the video for everyone to read and enjoy. And come on back for more Hal Clement. He didn't write a huge number of stories. There's only a total of 56 here. And quite a number of those are novels. We got a little ways to go before we hit his first novel, though. His next story, number 10, is titled Answer. I hope you'll join me for that and all the other Hal Clement I do, and all the other stories and authors that I cover, that we cover, because Emily does get a chance to join me now and then here on Telltale Books.